Most entrepreneurs tie their confidence to the revenue they earn in their business. Therefore, when they have a down month in revenue, their confidence dips with it. What if it was built on something that can't be shaken? I've coached over 600 entrepreneurs and I've watched this play out over and over again. The ones who stay in the game aren't the ones with the biggest months. They're the ones that built a confidence on a foundation that cannot be moved. Today, I'm going to walk you through 6 things that separate confident entrepreneurs from the ones that are always just 1 month away from completely falling apart. So let's start by defining what is confidence. Well, here's what it's not. It's not never having the fear of failing. It's not having all the answers and being a Mr. Know-it-all. That's not where confidence comes from. It's not being naturally more optimistic and just more outgoing. And it's not believing that you will never fail and make mistakes. So let's define the word confidence. The word confidence is actually Latin, and the word is pronounced confidere. And there's 2 parts of that word, the C-O-N, the con, and the fidere part. So the word con, that just simply means with, and then the word fidere means to trust with. It literally means to fully trust. Trust who? Not trust others, but to trust yourself. Think about that. Confidence is not rooted in certainty. As an entrepreneur, we often trust our revenue. We trust the number of clients that we have or the particular clients we have. Maybe it's the reputation that you've earned and built over time, or others, people's opinions. Like, all of those things are subject to change. They're all outside of you. So those things change. So here's the question. Real confidence asks this: what or who are you placing your trust in? Because whatever you trust the most will be determined by how stable your confidence becomes. So for me, a big part of confidence is trusting in God. Some people say having faith in God, and yet a mentor of mine, shout out to David, says faith is simply trust. So for me, it's having trust ultimately in God is where confidence comes from. And it's this: I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know the one who holds tomorrow. It's trusting God. So then now let's talk about 6 practical ways to build the kind of confidence that's worth having. So the first thing that I've noticed in successful entrepreneurs is we do this. We build an identity before your business. Here's the big idea of this point. Who you are should never depend on how your business is performing. It's going to be mission critical that you have an identity that's rooted, that's grounded, that's much deeper than just the performance of your business. By the way, if you hear a chicken, that's a chicken in my backyard. We have them running around. So your business is something you do. Your identity flows from who you are. Too many entrepreneurs, in my opinion, when you ask them who they are, they simply reply with what they do, in particular when it comes to their business. When your business struggles, you begin to question yourself. That's because your identity is rooted in your business and not deeper in Christ. That's my vocabulary. It's not rooted in something deeper than all the surface level metrics of your business. Even though those metrics are important, I'm just here to say they're not the most important. So you have to separate your identity from your performance. And if you're like me, a high achiever that's ambitious, that's visionary when it comes to the future, that for sure is a real challenge. Build your identity around your character, your values, purpose, and faith. For me, one of the keys that I just shared that's been incredibly helpful, not only in my business and my life, but for my wife and I in this season we are with parenting young adults. It blows my mind that our oldest, who it seems like just yesterday, Shaylee was just a baby and we were bringing her home from the hospital. She'll be 21 at the end of next month. So the point of me sharing that is that it's going to be important not only in your business, but in your life, especially if you're married, for you and your spouse to clearly define what your values are. By the way, just because you could say that you value faith and she values faith, that's not enough, because the same word could have two different meanings. Meaning, what that word means, you're speaking from two different dictionaries, meaning translations. So it's going to be important not only to identify your core value in life, to get on the same page with you and your spouse when it comes to your values, making sure that you define the word together so you're on the same page. So how do you have an identity that's not built just around your business or comes from your business? It's going to be build your identity around your character. Build it around your faith. What is it that you believe fundamentally? Your belief system. What is it? What's the things that you believe when it comes to your faith? What you believe about purpose in life and values. What are the things that you value? What are your core values? I remember when I started my real estate business 19 years ago, in the office, there was a big white dry erase board, and one side said listings, the other said buyers, and we had the honor of walking by this scoreboard. It was where we could see it multiple times a day in the real estate office, right by the kitchen where everybody got their coffee, right? And so I remember being the youngest person in the office in my early 20s, and I would look at all these names up on this scoreboard that was posted for everybody in the office to see. And I remember so badly just wanting to continually have my name be up on that scoreboard more than anything else. Well, let's think about that. Obviously, I was immature in my faith. I was immature in my thinking about where I pull my value from, being in my early 20s. And yet my identity was coming from how many times my name was up on that scoreboard, or if it was up there at all. Well, that was a recipe for disaster. And here's the question I want to leave you with as we move on to the second thing I've realized. Here's the question. Who are you when business is not going how you desire it to go? So the second thing that I've noticed that top achievers do, the most successful entrepreneurs that I've worked with, we do this. We make it a point to keep promises with ourselves, and not only with ourselves, with others, to be a promise keeper. But more importantly than keeping promises with others, because that flows from keeping promises with yourself. So confidence grows through trusting yourself. It's an inside job. A mentor of mine says we live life from the inside out, and being a promise keeper is a great example of that. So self-confidence really stems from the inside job of having self-trust from keeping promises to yourself. So every promise that you keep is the evidence that you're trustworthy, that you can trust you. Every promise you break, well, that's going to take you the opposite direction. Think about this. You're the only person that knows every promise that you've made to yourself that you haven't kept. Think about that. Only you know all the promises that you've made to yourself that you haven't kept. Ouch, that could be painful. So what do we do with that? Here's a simple, small step. I like to focus on taking the one next step. Like, what's the one next right thing I can do? And it's this. Start with a small daily commitment, something that you can commit to. You've made a decision, meaning you cut off all other options. You've made a decision, and now you're ready to commit to doing one small thing daily. Maybe that one small thing is as simple as when your alarm goes off in the morning, you're not going to hit the snooze button, you're actually going to wake up. Or maybe it's more of you're dialed into waking up at the same time, and you're going to start the habit of, instead of grabbing your cell phone, you're going to make it a point to drink a glass of water or to journal or to pray, whatever it is, or maybe it's to sit and have 1 minute of silence. I have a friend this year, he told me his goal is every day this year to have, right when he wakes up, is to have 5 minutes of pure quiet time where he's not listening to a podcast, he's not even reading his Bible, he's not grabbing his phone. He's just going to sit there in silence and take 5 minutes a day to do that. So find something that you could do daily. Discipline builds confidence before success does. And discipline is not about showing up on the scoreboard at the office or the profit in your business. The discipline can come from choosing to focus on one thing to do. So think about your morning routine. Think about the rhythm that you have for keeping your body fit and strong and healthy by maybe how often you move it, how many steps you take in a day. Maybe it's about prospecting or lead generation in your business. Maybe you're going to narrow it down to have 5 conversations. Let's make it even more simple than 5. Let's make it one conversation that you're going to have with another human being each day. Maybe it's about reading, or maybe prayer, or maybe better planning for tomorrow. I'm not sure what's relevant to you. You get to choose and pick. So confidence is earned in private before it's displayed in public. You earn in private long before it's displayed in public. So here's my challenge to you. Here's the question for this section. What's one promise that you need to keep today? What's one promise you need to make to yourself that you're going to start keeping starting today? So here's the third thing that I've noticed that confident entrepreneurs do. We take courageous action before we feel ready. Here's the big idea. Action actually creates confidence. Confidence comes from doing the thing, not thinking about the thing, not praying about the thing, not meditating about the thing, not talking to somebody else about the thing, but it comes from actually doing the thing. Doing leads to discovery, and it also leads to confidence. So most people wait until they feel confident, and therefore the opportunity passes. Therefore they're always it's getting ready, aim, and they never fire. It's going to be important that you take action, especially as an entrepreneur. I heard a story about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was being interviewed, and Michael Jackson shared about how if he wakes up in the middle of the night, he doesn't care if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. If he wakes up in the middle of the night with new lyrics to a new song, he will go into the recording studio and start recording that. And the person interviewing him said, well, why don't you just go back to bed or journal it, write it down, capture it, and go back to sleep and wake up in the morning and then go into the studio? Michael Jackson replied, he said, I'm afraid that if I go back to sleep, that Prince, the singer Prince, will wake up and he'll go into the recording studio and record the hit song. Meaning that Michael Jackson thought that God would give someone else the idea if he didn't take action on that. And I thought that's brilliant. I don't think that it's wise to live in fear of missing out. And yet I love the sense of urgency that Michael Jackson had to seize the moment, that when the thought comes, take action on it then. I just love the urgency that he acted with in that story. So, confidence follows experience. Courage actually comes first. It takes courage to take action. Remember, it's trust, the inner trust. So let's think about what is it that causes, what's some things as an entrepreneur that we may need to pull the trigger on, and you may not feel like you're ready at this point. Starting a business is a big one. So many people I meet, so many people I talk to, they feel stuck in their career. They've been working the 9-to-5 job for decades, and you're probably really good at what you do, and you have creative business ideas. You just haven't pulled the trigger to start that business idea. So for you, maybe the next step in taking action is to move from theory and thinking about it to actually starting your business. Now, that doesn't mean that you put in your 2 weeks notice and you quit. Don't do that. That's probably not a wise step at this point. We could talk about how to transition smoothly in the future in another episode, but maybe for you to take action means you actually start that business. Or maybe it means to do the thing that you've been avoiding, meaning make the phone calls to your people, make those prospecting calls, because it doesn't matter how great your product or service is. If you have no clients to serve, you have no business. So make the call. Maybe you've been thinking about a social media strategy of doing exactly what I'm doing here for you right now, showing up in this video. Maybe it's time to stop thinking about the best tips and tricks and strategy for making videos, and you just need to simply turn around your phone and start recording. Maybe it's raising your prices. You've been thinking about all year. You see the value you bring in your business. You have the testimonials. You're helping people get the transformation they hire you for. And yet you haven't pulled the trigger on raising your prices. So maybe the next thing you could do is to raise your prices. Or maybe it's time for leverage. You've maximized every hour, every minute in your day. And for you, the next step is to hire that person. By the way, just because you hire a person doesn't mean that you hire them full time. What if you hire them to work a handful of hours a week in your business doing a highly focused activity that you need help with? So maybe for you, it's making that next hire. You don't think your way into confidence. You act your way to confidence. Confidence can come from taking action. So here's the question before we move on. What uncomfortable action have you been avoiding? What are you avoiding? So the four things successful entrepreneurs, what we do is this. We focus on progress instead of perfection. We focus on progress instead of perfection. Here's the big idea. Perfection keeps entrepreneurs stuck. It's kind of tied in with that last one we talked about, where it's the idea of not taking action. One of the reasons that you may not be taking action is because you're tied up into perfection. So when somebody starts trying to over-explain to me about why they're not taking action, and they want the advertisement to be better, the job description to be better, they want it more polished, and they're always building the website, building the landing page, building their offer, whatever it is, I know that it's not about the perfection. It's actually what they're doing is they're actually self-sabotaging, and there's a limiting belief that's telling them that they're better off to focus on perfection and then launch. So it's not about perfection, it's about progress. I like to think about progress meaning take the next step. That's all you have to do is take that one next step. So perfection, this idea of perfection, is one of the things that I see so many of you entrepreneurs focus on that actually keeps you stuck from serving more people and earning more revenue in your business. So perfection actually creates procrastination. That's the word I was trying to think of earlier, procrastination. Progress, when you take that one next step, you'll start to create momentum. An important key to gain momentum to help you continue to make progress is to celebrate the wins. So let's back up. When you do that next thing that you've been thinking about doing, that you've been putting off, or you start that one habit that you've been thinking of, back to not hitting the snooze alarm button in the morning, celebrate that win. Meaning, don't just move past it and say, oh, it's only been 7 days or only 1 day. No, celebrate. Share with your spouse, your significant other, a trusted friend. Share with people what you're doing and let them know that you're actually doing it. That's a real simple way to insert some accountability, is by share the commitment you made with someone else and ask them to check in with you on that one. Or just tell them straight up you're going to check in with them and report back to them and let them know how it goes. So you got to celebrate the wins. There's a book written by Dr. Benjamin Hardy that's one of my favorites about this. It's called The Gap versus the Gain. The premise of the book, the one thing I remember from the book, Dr. Benjamin Hardy talks about that most entrepreneurs are so driven that instead of celebrating the wins, we just focus on the gap, meaning the opportunity, what needs to happen, the thing that's not currently happening. We don't actually reflect back on the momentum we've started, the thing that we're doing. We don't celebrate that at all. We focus on the gap. So watch out for comparison. Compare yourself to yesterday and the progress that you're making, not someone else and the reel that you see that they post on social media. Most of social media is not real anyways, right? Think about this on social media, on Instagram. I was just scrolling on Instagram and everything's polished and put together and everything looks beautiful and dialed in. And yet that's not reality. That's not real life. So don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides. That's a recipe for disaster. So one imperfect video per week beats waiting 6 months to get ready and post the perfect one. So here's the question I'm going to leave you with before we move on to the fifth thing I've noticed. The question is, if perfection wasn't required, what would you start today? What would you take action on? Maybe drop that one in the comments. By the way, share with me which one resonates with you the most. I would love to hear where you're at with this. And when I see it, I'll reply back. So here's the fifth thing I've noticed about us successful entrepreneurs. We guard our inner dialogue, meaning that we pay attention to the thoughts that we're thinking just in general. We have to start taking inventory of the thoughts that you take inventory of the thoughts that you're thinking. The conversation you have with yourself shapes your confidence. Think about this. The person that you talk to or the person that you listen to the most is yourself. The person that's most influential in your life is you talking to you about you when no one else is around. That voice matters. So everyone has an inner voice. Is yours encouraging you or is yours belittling? Talking about how you're a lesser than, always trying to get you in the trap of comparison. Always trying to get you to focus on the loss instead of the wins. What is your inner talk like with yourself? And pay attention to your repetitive thoughts. I've heard John Gordon in his book, The Garden, he talks about we could have 3 different kinds of thoughts. We could have thoughts that come from ourselves. We could have thoughts that come from God. We could have thoughts that come from the enemy. So pay attention to your thoughts. Start taking inventory of your thoughts, meaning be aware of them. All transformation begins with awareness. And what I'm talking about is becoming more aware, self-aware of your inner thoughts. So pay attention to repeated thoughts. You don't control the first thought. That's why I mentioned John Gordon's book, The Garden, is because one of the things that helped me so much, in particular back in 2020, where my optimistic, positive self started having panic attacks in the middle of the night, waking up 3 days in a row, feeling like I was having a heart attack, and I go into the emergency room. I have my wife drop me off because during COVID, there was isolation going on in the hospitals. You remember all of that? Well, so she dropped me off by myself. You talk about feeling terrified. I feel like I'm going to have a heart attack. And then my wife has to drop me off because she can't go in the hospital with me. And they're running all the blood work, have me hooked up to the IV and all the heart rate monitor. And you know what they find out, what was going on with my health? Absolutely nothing. They said I was healthy as can be. All of my metrics looked great. And yet they asked me a question. They said this: how would you rate your current stress level? What do you do for a living? And I thought to myself, that's interesting. So you're telling me that there was nothing physical going on with me. It was all up here in my mind. I didn't ask them that, but that was my self-talk when they sent me home with the paperwork, giving me some recommendations about how to handle anxiety, not fear, anxiety. That rocked my world. I said all that to say this. The book that I found the most helpful was the book, The Garden by John Gordon. And he said that you don't control your first thought, but you can control the second thoughts and the thoughts after. There's so much freedom there. I wonder what repetitive thought that you have that is self-sabotaging you, that is a lie from the enemy, that's causing you to not take action, that's actually holding you back from the plan and the potential and the purposes that God has for you to serve others and to be of service and to help others. I wonder if there's a lie that you've been believing that's showing up in a reoccurring thought. That might be worth pondering on. So you got to figure out what the lie is and then replace that with the truth. Replace the lie with the truth. You got to protect what you consume. There's a little song. It's a little nursery rhyme type of song for toddlers. I don't remember the whole thing, but I remember this part. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. And then there's another part of the song. It goes, be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little ears, what you hear. Now, I might not fundamentally agree with the rest of the song, right? And yet I agree with the part that you got to be aware of what you see, what you're watching, what you're giving your attention to, and what you're listening to. Because what you see and what you hear, you're going to develop an appetite for. You're going to want more of that. So you got to protect what you're consuming. Protect what you're seeing. Protect what you're taking in through your ears. And you got to evaluate the people you're hanging out with, right? You've heard the saying, my mom used to say this, birds of a feather flock together. It's absolutely true. And the Bible says that bad company will corrupt good character. Bad company will corrupt good character. So you got to spend time with people who call out your potential, not call out the problems in you or the world around them. So many people get hyper-focused on all the problems going on around the world, and that robs them of the energy and attention and intention required to do something about the problems in their own world. So don't hang out with those people. Hang out more with people that call out your potential and that support you and encourage you, that believe in where you're looking to go. Game changer right there. So here's an exercise. Write down the most common negative thought you have. And ask yourself this. Is it true? Is that thought true? Is it helpful? And would a fully confident entrepreneur, more important than entrepreneur is, would a fully confident man or woman of God believe instead? What would a fully confident man or woman of God believe instead? That's that part where we replace the lie with the truth. So here's the very last one. Us successful entrepreneurs, we reflect more than we regret. Let me say that again. That was sloppy. Us successful entrepreneurs, we reflect more than regret. Confidence grows when you remember the progress that you've made so far. You look back and you see the progress that you made so far. I was in a conversation and I ran into a gentleman at Starbucks who he showed up to a Bible study that I help lead. That's once a month in the community here. And I had a conversation with him and he said, Chris, so what's new over this past year? And it was kind of unplanned for conversation. So it caught me off guard. And I just shared the one thing that came to my mind. And after I drove away in my car from that conversation, I looked at our text message when I got home between that gentleman and I, and the last time that I spoke to him was 13 months ago. So just over a year. And I thought, okay, what has happened in my life over this past year? And I thought, I just released a book a few months ago. I got my website dialed in. I created my assessment to help people figure out how they're wired and gifted as an entrepreneur. By the way, if you're wondering that, go to chriswardcoaching.com, take my 2-minute assessment, and take the assessment, and I give you some key areas that will help you grow, that you'll be encouraged, where it'll be like, oh yeah, I asked a gentleman earlier today that took my assessment. I said on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being not accurate, 10 being incredibly accurate, how would you rate the response from the assessment? And he said, oh man, it's a 10 plus. It's extremely accurate. So my point is if you would like some encouragement today about your gifting and how you're wired as an entrepreneur, go to Chris Ward Coaching and take the free assessment. It only takes 2 minutes. So confidence grows when you remember the progress that you've made. As entrepreneurs, you can get stuck in the negative feedback loop of the deal that fell apart, the thing that happened that you didn't see coming. It's easy to get hyper focused on the thing that didn't work out the way you intended. You got to watch out for that trap of getting hyper focused on replaying the failures, the things that didn't go right, playing those over and over again in your mind. That's not going to help you move forward. Confident people replay the growth. We focus on growth. We learn the lesson from the failure. John Maxwell has a book called Fail Forward. And one of the ways that we can fail forward and keep going is identify the lesson. So remember how far you've come. Celebrate the wins. Remember what you've overcome. Celebrate the clients that you've helped. And maybe one of the things that you could do is what I do in the morning. I like to journal 5 things I'm thankful for. A lot of times these are people that I end up thinking of, a conversation that I have. A lot of times what I end up journaling about in the morning. So the discipline is to write down 5 things in the morning in my journal that I'm thankful for. Maybe that's something that you could start doing. Maybe instead of writing 5 things, it's starting to focus on just the one thing that you're thankful from the day before. I want to give a book recommendation here of The Love Dare. Side note, I'll get back to point number 6. This story speaks to the significance on keeping a win journal and focusing on the wins. So there was a season in my marriage where I got super critical of my wife. I'll share an example. Like one of my pet peeves is wet water around the sink in the kitchen. Or maybe a cabinet door open in the kitchen. Like those things frustrate me. And what happened, I had a season where with my beautiful, loving wife, I got hyper focused on nitpicking and super critical to where all I would do is I would find the little things that she would do and annoy me. And I'll tell you this, that played out over a week, played out over a month, played out over a quarter, played out over a year. It was not looking good for me. I became so critical that it was causing a lot of tension, to put it nicely, in our relationship. And there was a book that came out before the movie did. Now it's a movie. And I recommend the movie and the book. But there's a book called The Love Dare, D-A-R-E, The Love Dare. And in this book, I think it takes about 21 days, where instead of nitpicking my spouse, it would give me an assignment, right? Such as, hey, find one thing that your spouse did today that you really appreciated and let them know. It gives a lesson, a short biblical lesson on the importance of marriage in particular and relationships, And then it gives you the homework piece of doing something to show appreciation and gratitude for your spouse or significant other one. And do you know, by the end of 21 days of doing that Love Dare challenge, I was able to move from being hyper focused on the nitpicky, annoying things that my spouse did to focusing on the things that I loved and admired and was thankful for her that she did. It completely shifted what I was focusing on. Okay, now back to that to me, what I was reminded of is the importance of keeping a win journal or gratitude journal. Maybe it's time that you start writing down not just the things that you do well, but what you love and appreciate about your spouse. Gratitude strengthens confidence. So here's some questions I want to leave you with when it comes to this chapter. What obstacles have you overcome? What challenges have you survived? Who have you helped? Who have you helped over this past month? Maybe this past week or year? And what have you learned? Write down a lesson. Share something that you have learned recently. Confidence isn't pretending that you're capable and have it all figured out and have all the answers. It's remembering that you already have evidence that you are. And little things compound. So when you celebrate the wins by focusing on gratitude and what you've done well, that becomes the evidence that builds that inner confidence that all of us desire. So this week, I want you to practice these 6 habits in conclusion. Build your identity beyond your business. Keep your promises to yourself and start with that one next promise. And when you fail, which you probably will because we're human beings, simply start over and move forward. Take one courageous action today or within the next 24 hours. Celebrate even one small step of progress. Replace one limiting thought or one lie with one truth. And the last one is reflect on one win or one victory that you probably have forgotten about. The strongest entrepreneurs are not the ones with the biggest businesses. They're the ones whose confidence isn't for sale to the highest bidder or destroyed by the lowest one. Because at its core, confidence means to fully trust, starting with trusting in God and trusting in oneself from keeping the promises that you make to yourself. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you next week, and let me know the one thing that benefited you today from investing your time into listening to this episode. We'll see you next week.